What the fuck is a Sonic? There, I did the joke, now let's move on. Nostalgic reviews.
Sonic R, Sonic R, Sonic R. What a perplexing one you are. Sega hoped for a hit, people thought you were shit even though Sonic was Sega's star. But enough limericks. Sonic R, as it should be noted by the name, was Sega's first attempt at a Sonic racing game trying to make an answer to Mario Kart. To say it failed would be massively understating it. Part of that had to do with the Sega Saturn's poor sales, which, to put it into perspective, even the highest estimates say it sold less than the Wii U. And another part of that had to do with it being critically panned. Well, actually, it was pretty favorably received at the time, but these days not so much. And as well, currently it's only known for one single aforementioned joke that pretty much overshadows the game itself. Its reputation precedes it, however, because I knew about it and I knew about its reputation long before I ever played it, but of course I eventually got around to it. This being one of my most recent forays into the ever-long quest to try and find a Sonic game that will sell me on the series. You see, I'm not a Sonic fan, as shocking as that may be. I know, right? An internet personality who's not a Sonic fan, whose name isn't Aaron Hansen? That's earth-shattering. I've played Sonic games in the past and even liked some of them, but there's never been something so great that it sold me on the series. Even Sonic Adventure 2, I played through to the true ending and thought it was... nothing really stood out to me. You see, with most series I like, there's a moment I can point to and say, that's the moment I became a fan. The Avion boss fight, R-Wing surfing, Ganon, but there's never been anything so good that it's ever sold me on Sonic. But that's possibly the best approach to have with Sonic R, because maybe this might end up being a decent game to an outside viewer with a fresh perspective. So that really is the question. Does Sonic R hold up to someone with no prior experience with it? And more to the point, does it pass the nostalgia test? Now, full disclosure, I am playing this on the Sonic Gems collection, which is a collection of, I believe, Sonic the Fighters, Sonic R, and Sonic CD, and a whole bunch of other obscure Sonic games. So, not so much a Gems collection, more of a, for the love of God, please buy this, we expected a return of investment 10 years ago collection. This game started development all the way back in 1996 and was co-developed by Traveler's Tales and Sonic Team. Now, I've been following Traveler's Tales for many years, but not intentionally. It's just that Traveler's Tales have been all over the map. Sonic games, Crash games, and now they're gonna have a nice meal ticket for the next 20 years or so, being the head developers of the rather excellent LEGO Whatever series. In the grand hierarchy of mascot-based platformers, I'd place them above Eurocom and on equal level to Vicarious Visions. They're really good and have made a lot of excellent games. Their history goes back many years though, and they were approached to make a 3D Sonic racing game after making Sonic 3D Blast. A tall task, but one they were certainly up for, and that game would of course eventually become Sonic R in 1997. So Sonic R has a plot. Surprising, I know, considering it makes no bearing on the game whatsoever and you have to go out of your way to find it. Apparently, Tails finds an advertisement for something called the World Grand Prix, which he enters because Domo Arigato Mr. Robotnik is also entering, who is using the races as a front to find the Chaos Emeralds, and then Knuckles and Amy join in to help stop the Eggy Bastard. There's more to it than that, but you get the point. As a narrative, it serves its purpose, I suppose. It doesn't affect the gameplay to any significant degree, so it's just kinda there, like an after-dinner mint at a fancy restaurant. If you so fancy, you can indulge, and it adds a little bit on top of the experience, but it doesn't take anything away if you leave it alone. Though even for what it is, there are some things that don't add up. Like if Eggy, Piggin and Piggy knows where the Chaos Emeralds are, couldn't he just take them instead of resorting to this weird racing gig? But that's neither here nor there. The story is what it is, nothing special, but it does what it needs to do. I'd say the actual strength in this game is the racing, surprisingly. I'm aware of this game's reputation on the internet as being one of the outright worst racing games ever made, but I think this game is a lot more mechanically sound than people give it credit for. The best thing to do is pick Sonic at the character select, because this is a Sonic racing game, and if you pick anybody other than Sonic in a Sonic racing game, I will personally mail you a brain cell because it looks like the one you have is lonely. So the idea is, of course, to race around around these tracks, but you don't necessarily win just by coming first place. You'll get to the end, but you're not necessarily winning, because as you can see, there's no one beaten path. It's a very non-linear racing game with exploration elements. The disadvantage of playing as Sonic is that he has terrible turning. Well, at least until you unlock Super Sonic, who has a lot better turning, but we'll get to that. Even subtracting that, he only has terrible turning if you don't know how to drift. It doesn't make sense that you can only drift while moving because, well, you're on foot, so you control like a car even though you're not in one. I think a quick turn button would have been preferable and more realistic for everyone, minus the two characters actually in vehicles, Amy and Wakey Wakey Eggs and Bakey.
Seriously, I've got like a dozen of these things. Egg salad sandwich, Robo-Rooter, Robot Wars, egg on your face, egg robot manic.
But we'll go with it. Even then, you can just work around the subpar turning by pressing the trigger buttons and drifting, so I don't see why this is such a common complaint. You may hit a wall while turning if you don't drift, but you'll rarely lose your momentum. Besides, this is the type of racing game where it doesn't matter what your other stats are, speed is the only thing that matters, ergo why Sonic is OP. Granted, there are other ways of going about winning, like how there are rings you can pick up throughout the stage, as well as bonus pickups, which will either be a random amount of rings or a power-up that makes ring collecting faster, and you can use rings to open up secret areas and shortcuts, or use the speed boost, which is massively useful in a pinch. Strangely, amongst racers, you can turn off rubber banding, a feature I really liked. Granted, it's a double-edged sword. While racers won't pull ahead, they also won't stay behind, so if you're indulging in the more collective aspects, you'll have to make doubly sure to do it quickly, otherwise it's all piss in the wind. And you know what piss in the wind means. Buying new shoes. Anyway, back on topic. Even though the handling can be weak if you don't drift, I still thought the handling was good. I felt like I was always in control and always knew where I was going, even if it was straight into a wall, which is more than I can say about Mario Kart 64. Though if there's one thing I would have changed right from the off, it's that I would have had accelerate be a button rather than holding forward, because if there's one thing the abysmal lava surfing section from Conker's Bad Fur Day has taught me, it's that tying the speed and the turning to one thing means you have to choose between the two moment to moment, i.e. you can't make sharp turns unless you ease off the acceleration, though Sonic R is nowhere near that bad, especially because this being a semi-non-linear racing game, you can go off-road and not be penalized for it. In fact, it's encouraged, but we'll get back to that. And beyond the invisible walls surrounding the arena, there's nothing that's out of bounds. In theory, anyway. I did find myself getting caught up in the loop-de-loops quite a bit, which pissed me off to no end, but that's what I get for... I still don't quite understand why this kept happening and why I wouldn't be able to get out. Might be a glitch. Wouldn't be surprised. Everybody's supersonic glitching. So you're always racing and you're always on track. You never have to deal with the flow-breaking 10 seconds of waiting to be put back on the track, which I like. The game compensates for its subpar handling, though only subpar if you don't know what you're doing, with its level design, which once again is more than I can say about Mario Kart 64. In fact, I'm just gonna say it, I think I like Sonic R more than Mario Kart 64. I think it plays better, it feels better mechanically, and while light on content, at least I'm having fun playing Sonic R, and it absolutely looks better than Mario Kart 64. Sonic R definitely retains that vivid, oversaturated, cartoony aesthetic that early Sonics were known for and translates it to 3D really well. This is how I'd imagine an original series Sonic put through the filter of 3D would look. Granted, I know mid-2000s Sonic was known for being edgy, but this Sonic is quite literally edgy. Like his hands could double his spatulas. But I do appreciate that they did manage full 3D in every aspect, which is more than I can say about, you know the drill. Which not only looks better, but it also means it plays slightly better, because when I turn, I can tell exactly where my character is going, because the character model matches the degree to which I'm turning. You can only have 5 racers racing at once, which is fine, that's more than enough to have a compelling race. Besides, the Sega Saturn was less powerful than the PS1, so I can live with it. And I'm surprised for how fast this game is, there's not more pop-in. It is there, but it's not as prominent as you may expect for an early 3D Sonic game of any kind, though the camera does tend to clip through the walls a fair bit.
We've reached the negative zone! I stopped caring like 10 minutes ago.
But it still finds a balance between performance and graphical quality. It doesn't feel like anything was sacrificed for the sake of making this game run well. It both looks and runs really well and looks really nice, colorful, and visually appealing. The levels look interesting and are well designed, and I especially like the weather effects, which not only look nice and change up the look of the levels, but it also subtly changes the gameplay. Like the traction might be less while it's raining, and you can walk on water if it's snowing, and it also changes up the look of the skyboxes, which is a nice but probably necessary touch. And speaking of skyboxes, they look amazing. amazing. The middle distance did not skip out on any detail, and it, while blurry, looks nice and adds a bit of atmosphere to every level, from the cityscape to the ancient ruins. Not only that, but the levels, despite being open-ended, feel very active and lively. There's a lot of little touches that make each environment feel like a living, breathing environment, like the motion of the water, chili dogs, or the fact that there's always different places to go. There's not one point I can think of where there's a large expanse of empty nothing, which is very impressive for a game this open-ended in this era. There's always something. Now, I know that people are very mixed on the soundtrack, but you know what? I really dig the music in this game. Maybe it's not right for a racing game, but I think the best soundtracks are the ones that you can listen to on your free time.
Time to look around. And you're supersonic racing, going to the point of no return. I just noticed I was the only one singing that.
Honestly, I think more soundtracks should include actual songs. I feel lyrics add a lot of personality. Of course, it wouldn't be right for every situation. I just think they should at least include them more. I've had a more genuine response to songs like Fade Away, This Broken Soul, If You Still Believe, Far Away, Snake Eater, and especially Guide You Home than any generic run-of-the-mill what I hesitate to call music from most of the big budget games these days. I think gaming music these days needs an overhaul in general. It's all exactly the same and not memorable whatsoever. Pick any number of PS1 or 2 soundtracks and I could probably pick out exactly what game they were from because they all had a unique sound and were iconic, but much like graphics, the more everything gets better and better, the more it's all exactly the same. Anyway, enough ranting on modern gaming. In spite of it not fitting the tone, I feel like these songs are just fun to listen to, uplifting and cheesy, but it's the good type of cheesy that makes you smile and ironically roll your eyes, not cringe cheesy. But they're all just good, well put together songs in their own right. I would have preferred this game's soundtrack be something a little bit more exciting and rocky, but I think this world's a better place for having supersonic racing and whatnot, even if they didn't quite fit. Though I will say there's some dark reoccurring themes.
So what you're saying is that if it wasn't sunny, you'd have offed yourself? You were on a hair trigger, madam.
Don't forget.
Why is your continued survival such a talking point?
And of course supersonic racing, which pretty much transcends this entire game.
What the
fuck is a Sonic?
Hold up. If you're supersonic racing, your feet aren't on the ground. How did you fuck that up?
Well, we've probably talked about that for long enough and meandered around the issues for long enough. I've talked about the good in Sonic R, and I truly believe there's a lot of good, but there's one issue that hangs over this game like a Half-Life barnacle, so it's time to address the elephant in the room and get this monkey off my back.
You won't go away.
If you think that I'm only showing footage from the first 5 levels, that's because those are the only 5 levels. Yes, this game is very barren with its content, and believe me when I say people are very keen to point this out. You have 5 levels in a time trial mode. To be honest though, the length doesn't bother me much. Of course I'd have liked Sonic R to be longer, but I really liked what's there, and being short doesn't make a bad game. Portal, for example. And people make it out like this game is the Antichrist because it has 1 to 2 hours worth of content. There's also the handling, but most people bring up the length. This game is shit because it only has 5 tracks. And I don't think that's the case. Each of these maps aren't the same as a map from a traditional racing game. As I've said, they're non-linear and have explorative elements. One of the best things to do is go through multiple paths within a racetrack and find the optimal ways to go through and the quickest ways to win, like the shortcut in Radical City.
Radical, dude.
Between all the non-linearity and various alt paths, I feel like the first 4 tracks at least are the equivalent of 3 tracks in the average racing game, and even Radiant Emerald has multiple paths to choose from and looks insanely visually appealing and oddly laid out like a PlayStation controller. They're really well constructed levels with a lot to do and a lot to explore and try out while you're racing, and even then there are very legitimate reasons to explore, because if you're able to find them, you get the Chaos Emeralds, which are well hidden throughout the levels, and sometimes you'll need to unlock the gates with massive amounts of rings, and sometimes you need to take a really inconvenient long way around, and once you've collected the level's emeralds, you need to win. Doing so will unlock Supersonic, the most OP character in the game, and has a tendency to do a look at my dick kind of pose. You also unlock I am the Eggman, we are the Eggman, I am the Walrus, Cuckoo Cuckoo by beating every race in first place. And then there's even more well-hidden collectibles, 5 tokens in every level, which once collected and you've placed in the top 3 will let you race to unlock new characters. Metal Sonic, same stats as Sonic except he can fly. Eggman Robo, who will deliberately take every shortcut so he's a bit of a bitch to race. Metal Knuckles, like Metal Sonic but badass. And last, but certainly least, Tails doll.
Kill him with fuel, kill him with fire, kill him with that which I desire. Strike one.
The fact that you can unlock all these characters in any order means that this is a choose your own difficulty curve game, and if you know what you're doing, it'll take around an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. But in spite of this game being short, I think it's actually the perfect length for what it is. If it had 5 more levels, it might have gotten obnoxious by the final level to explore it thoroughly and unlock all the various characters. Maybe if there were 5 explorative levels and 5 linear levels, that would have helped. Besides, I'd take something short and sweet over long and obnoxious. Sonic R is somewhat mechanically tight, and it actually does things a lot of racing games don't, like the explorative elements while racing, which adds a nice variety to the basic gameplay. I think the most boring type of racing game is one with a single beaten path with no variation, because then you're just driving idly around for 3 or more laps. It's the ones that mix up the formula and make you think, make you strategize, and make you earn a shortcut. You know, the ones that require actual skill to beat, those are the good ones. And I think this is something that Sonic R does really quite well. I also think that racing games that there are things to do other than idly racing are the most interesting racing games. Non-linear maps that let me take the reins and take a look over things myself, or at least have different ways to go, with things other than a walled-off track. Not to bring up that age-old debate again, but I'd take Regal Ruins over the N64 Rainbow Road any day, because Regal Ruins is actually interesting with more to do than just drive in a circle for 10 minutes. Short as it may be, I had fun with Sonic R. And the funny thing is, taken pound for pound, Sonic R and Mario Kart 64 have pretty much the exact same amount of content. I mean, yeah, Sonic R might have less tracks, but they're also a lot more dense tracks. I mean, people don't complain about how barren Mario Kart 64 is, and 95% of that game's content is like pure padding. Hey, you want to play the exact same thing you just played except slightly faster? I mean, would people get on Sonic R's case if it had a mirror mode? I don't know, because if that's what counts as content, then I guess not. Short as it may be, I had fun with Sonic R. Is it a masterpiece? Not by any stretch of the imagination. But even if I did beat it in an hour and a half, I would take 5 interesting maps with more to do than just drive around than 16 boring maps, because I spend pretty much the exact same time span on 16 maps. Difference is, I had fun with the 5. What's funny is the lack of content seems to have been a deliberate choice, because having read over the development history, there's nothing that's led me to believe that this was a rush job, or that it was cut down and not what the developers intended it to be. Am I missing something? Am I reading the wrong articles? Or was this game designed as intended? Because on one hand, I think this game was solid in spite of a lack of content, but on the other hand, it does seem kind of odd that they appear to have deliberately made it with an hour's worth of content, as I can't find any evidence to the contrary. The only thing I can find to this conclusion would be a pretty vague statement. Technical and scheduling issues caused Saito to change the game's design, leading to a dispute with producer Yuji Naka, and Saito removed his name from the credits. But what any of that means is anybody's guess. It doesn't mention what was changed, there's no implication of cut content or the game being a rush job, it just points to some very nebulous events that may or may not have affected the game as a finished product. So am I missing something? The only other thing that might lead to any sort of conclusion that this game's lack of content was not the original intention is that it came out in 1997, a whole year before the Dreamcast. So it was one of the, if not the last major release on the Sega Saturn, so this might have actually been rushed out so it didn't coincide with the Dreamcast. It also only began production in 1996, but this was also during an era where better games were made in less time. Was Sonic R a special case in that regard? It's also worth mentioning that this was arrogant mid-90s Sega we're talking about, who were kinda like early 2010s Nintendo except much worse with much less money. So I wouldn't have put it past them to sacrifice quality and brand appeal for the possibility of future money, but Sonic R's not broken. It doesn't strike me as cut down, so I don't know. If it was a deliberate decision to have so little content, that was very disrespectful to the fans, because this isn't like today where you can make an hour-long game and sell millions, or have critically acclaimed glorified tech demo games with shallow content at best. This was during an era where having a 10-hour campaign was the rule, not the exception. Though it should still be the rule, frankly. One of the many reasons I don't like modern gaming. But none of what I've inferred about Sonic R's development, to my knowledge, is verified. It's just an educated guess, or a theory. A game No. So in spite of this game being really solid for what it is, my big question is why? Why is it the way it is? Am I missing something? Am I looking in the wrong places? Probably. Now, everything I've said today does need to come with a massive qualifier, okay? I'm not sure how faithful the GameCube version is to the original Sega Saturn release, so it might be a significantly updated version, or it might be a straight emulation. Either way, the version that I played on the GameCube is surprisingly solid for as insubstantial as it is.
So, does Sonic R pass the nostalgia test? You know what? Yeah. Short as it may have been, I definitely enjoyed my time with it. I thought it was very solidly made for as insubstantial as it was. Though it is funny to note that Sonic R is the last classic Sonic game coming out in 1997, whereas Sonic Adventure would come out in 1998 and reinvent everything Sonic. Reinvent the characters, reinvent the gameplay, reinvent everything. Now, I can't say I'm sold on Sonic as a franchise yet. Still not. Sorry, still not a fan. So whether or not it was for the best still remains to be seen, but maybe I'll check some of those games out. Oh my god, dystopian future TGX? In the flesh. Or at least what's left of it. Hold up, didn't I kill you? Oh, that was deemed non-canon. By who? By me. Well, what are you doing here? You may have liked Sonic R, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Oh yeah? You ain't seen Sonic the Fighters. Are you sure you're not dead? I hope nobody lambasts me for essentially copying a joke, but I'm subverting the joke is the thing. I'm making sure that the joke is mine because I don't want anybody in the comments to be like, what the fuck is this? I'm so funny, I'm so original. No. I'm being original by subverting the fucking joke, alright? What the fuck is a Sonic? There, I did the joke, now let's move on.